The glass door of Sterling Motors opened with a soft creak, and the luxurious showroom, with its gleaming cars and sparkling chandeliers, fell silent for a moment. A black woman with deep, rich skin entered with confident strides, dressed in simple jeans, a gray t-shirt, and worn but clean white sneakers. Her curly hair was tied up in a casual bun, and she carried only a battered shoulder bag. To anyone there, she looked out of place, as if she had wandered into the wrong building. And to Jennifer, the sales manager, that's exactly what it seemed. Jennifer, in her impeccable blazer, broke off a conversation with Chloe, the receptionist, and cast a disdainful glance. "What's she doing here?" she whispered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Does she think this is a bus stop?" Chloe, touching up her lipstick in the reflection of a display case, gave a low laugh. "Maybe she wants a free car," she said, her tone oozing prejudice. Ethan and Ryan, junior salespeople, approached, exchanging smirks and comments about the Sterling Motors standard. The veiled racism hung in the air, as sharp as the shine on the car's hoods. The woman, Emily, though no one knew her name, yet ignored the stares and walked through the showroom, her dark eyes taking in every detail: the cars, the staff, the atmosphere. Her calm was unnerving, as if she knew something no one else did. Jennifer, unable to contain her irritation, stepped forward. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice sweet but laced with venom that didn't hide her judgment. "This is a high-end dealership, you know. I'm not sure you're in the right place." Emily stopped, locking eyes with Jennifer. Her gaze didn't waver, and a faint smile curved her lips. "I want to speak with the general manager," she said, her voice firm and clear, cutting through the silence like a blade. The audacity caught Jennifer off guard. "The general manager?" She shot back, laughing loudly, drawing looks from Chloe, Ethan, and Ryan. "Honey, Michael doesn't meet with just anyone, and frankly—" She paused, eyeing Emily up and down, her racism blatant in her tone. "You don't look like you have anything to offer here." The showroom grew tense. Chloe crossed her arms, Ethan coughed uncomfortably, and Ryan muttered something about security. But Emily didn't budge. She slipped her hands into her jeans pockets and tilted her head, as if she were sizing up not the cars, but the people in front of her. "Call Michael," she repeated, her voice quieter now but carrying an authority that made Jennifer hesitate. "He's expecting me." Jennifer opened her mouth to retort, but something in Emily's demeanor, a confidence that defied the scornful looks, made her swallow her words. "You're kidding, right?" she said, but her voice trembled slightly. The hum of the air conditioning seemed to amplify the discomfort. Emily took a step forward, the sound of her sneakers echoing on the polished floor. "Tell him the new owner of Sterling Motors is here." The air was sucked out of the showroom. Jennifer blinked, stunned, her face paling. Chloe's phone clattered onto the desk. Ethan and Ryan exchanged panicked glances, Ryan's coffee nearly spilling. Before anyone could respond, the door to the back office opened, and Michael, the general manager, appeared, wiping sweat from his brow. "Emily," he said, his voice a mix of relief and nervousness. "Welcome to Sterling Motors, boss." The silence that followed was deafening. The employees, who moments ago had been laughing and judging, now stared at Emily with a mix of shock and fear. Who was this black woman, dressed so simply, who had just turned their world upside down? The silence in the Sterling Motors showroom was so thick it seemed to choke the air. Michael's revelation still echoed. Emily, the new owner of Sterling Motors. The employees, frozen, stared at the black woman in simple jeans and a gray t-shirt, her worn sneakers echoing on the polished floor as a reminder of her unyielding presence. Jennifer, the sales manager, felt her face burn, her earlier arrogance crumbling like a house of cards. Chloe, the receptionist, still clutched her phone, but her fingers trembled and her mocking smile had vanished. Ethan and Ryan, the junior salespeople, stood motionless, as if hoping the floor would swallow them whole. Emily, in the center of the showroom, didn't say a word. Her dark eyes scanned each face, taking in the expressions of shock, guilt, and discomfort. She didn't need to speak. Her presence, now charged with her newly revealed authority, spoke for her. But the weight of what had happened earlier, the scornful looks, the whispered racist comments, the assumption that she didn't belong, hung like a storm about to break. Jennifer was the first to break the silence, her trembling voice trying to regain control. This must be some mistake," she said, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "I mean, no one told us that." She hesitated, looking to Michael for support, but the general manager only lowered his eyes, clearly uncomfortable. "That the new owner would be you," she finished, her words laced with a tone that tried to mask her prejudice but failed miserably. Emily raised an eyebrow, the movement so subtle it almost went unnoticed, but enough to make Jennifer take a step back. "No one told you?" Emily asked, her voice calm but with a steely edge that cut like glass. "Or did you just assume I couldn't be the owner because of this?" She gestured to herself, the motion encompassing her simple clothes and, implicitly, her black skin. The question hung in the air, sharp, exposing the truth everyone wanted to avoid. Chloe, still behind the counter, tried to defend herself. "That's not it. It's just that, well, you don't look—" She stopped, realizing each word dug her deeper. Ethan, attempting to ease the tension, jumped in with a nervous laugh. "I mean, it's a high-end dealership, you know. We just thought—" He trailed off as Emily's eyes turned to him steady, as if seeing through his facade. "You thought a black woman dressed like this could only be lost, right?" Emily finished, her voice now louder but still controlled, each syllable laced with restrained indignation. "That I couldn't possibly have anything to do with a place like this. That I couldn't be the person deciding the future of Sterling Motors." The showroom seemed to shrink under the weight of her words. Ryan, who had stayed silent until now, shifted uncomfortably, muttering something inaudible. Jennifer, feeling control slip away, crossed her arms and tried to shift her tone. "Look, it's not personal. It's just the company standard. We deal with high-end clients and appearances matter. You get that, right?" Her tone was condescending, as if explaining something obvious to a child. Emily took a step forward, the sound of her sneakers on the polished floor echoing like a miniature thunderclap. "What I get," she said, pausing to let her words sink in, "is that you judged my competence before even knowing me, judged me by what I'm wearing, by the color of my skin. And that," she looked directly at Jennifer, then at Chloe, Ethan, and Ryan, "is exactly why I'm here." Michael, still standing at the office door, cleared his throat, trying to diffuse the tension. Miss Carter," he corrected himself quickly, "maybe we can talk in my office, discuss next steps?" He gestured, almost pleading. But Emily raised a hand, silencing him effortlessly. "Not yet," she said, her eyes fixed on Jennifer. "I want to hear what they have to say. I want to know why they think they can decide who belongs in this place and who doesn't." The question wasn't just a challenge, it was a mirror, forcing each of them to confront their own actions. Jennifer opened her mouth, but no words came out. Chloe looked away, pretending to shuffle papers on the counter. Ethan and Ryan exchanged glances, clearly at a loss for how to respond. The silence that settled was more than awkward. It was accusatory. Every second that passed without an answer was an admission of guilt, an acknowledgement of the prejudice they had hurled at Emily from the moment she walked through the door. Emily, however, wasn't content with just exposing their failure. She took another step forward, now so close to Jennifer that the manager instinctively stepped back. "You have one chance," Emily said, her voice low but firm as granite. "One chance to show me you can be better than this. Because starting today, this dealership is going to change, and I won't tolerate this kind of behavior. Not here. Not in my Sterling Motors." The weight of the word "my" landed like an anvil. Jennifer swallowed hard, her face red with shame and suppressed anger. Chloe, for the first time, looked genuinely embarrassed, her eyes fixed on the floor. Ethan and Ryan, unsure what to do, just nodded as if trying to appease the storm that Emily represented. Michael, seeing the situation spiral out of control, tried to intervene again. "Ms. Carter, please, let's arrange a team meeting. I'm sure everyone here is open to change." He glanced at the employees, a clear warning in his eyes. Emily finally shifted her gaze from Jennifer to Michael. "A meeting," she said with a slight nod. "Good idea. Let's start now." She turned to the group, a smile returning to her face, but now with a glint that mixed determination and challenge. "I want to hear from all of you, every single one, and I want to know how you plan to be part of the new Sterling Motors, or if you'd rather be left out." The showroom, once a stage for arrogance and prejudice, was now an emotional battlefield. Emily, with her unrelenting calm, had turned the tables. But the tension in the air made it clear. The confrontation was only beginning, and everyone there, Jennifer, Chloe, Ethan, Ryan, and even Michael, knew they'd have to choose a side. The Sterling Motors showroom, with its gleaming cars and crystal chandeliers, seemed small in the face of Emily Carter's presence. Seated at the head of the meeting table, she observed the employees with a calm that was both disarming and intimidating. Jennifer, Chloe, Ethan, and Ryan sat across from her, each with an expression ranging from shame to defensiveness to fear. Michael, the general manager, fidgeted nervously with a pen, trying to maintain his composure. The revelation that Emily, the black woman they had mocked for her skin and simple clothes, was the new owner still burned like an open wound. Emily clasped her hands on the table, the fabric of her gray t-shirt contrasting with the glossy varnish of the furniture. "I want to hear from you," she said, her voice firm but without the accusatory tone the employees expected. "I want to know who you are. Not your titles, not your sales, who you really are." The request, so simple and direct, caught everyone off guard. Jennifer, used to leading with orders and intimidation, blinked, confused. "What? What do you mean?" she stammered, her defensive tone barely masking her discomfort. Emily tilted her head, her curly hair tied in a bun catching the soft light of the room. "I want to know what brings you here every day," she replied. "What drives you? Because if we're going to work together, we need to build something bigger than sales, something that matters." Her voice was like a steady current, but with a force that pulled everyone in. It was the first time anyone at Sterling Motors had spoken of purpose, not profit. Chloe, still shaken from the earlier confrontation, tried to speak, but her voice came out hesitant. I like working with people," she said, staring at the floor. "I like helping clients find the right car." It was a generic response, but Emily nodded, as if seeing something beyond the words. "That's a start," she said, a faint smile appearing. "And you, Ethan?" Ethan, who had spent the entire meeting avoiding Emily's gaze, rubbed the back of his neck. Well, I need the job. My daughter's in school, and the bills don't stop." He hesitated, as if afraid his honesty made him seem weak. But Emily leaned forward, her eyes shining with something like understanding. "That's real," she said. "Taking care of your daughter is a powerful reason. Let's keep that in mind when we talk about changes here." The atmosphere shifted. The tension, once suffocating, began to ease, as if Emily's calm was dissolving the barriers the employees had built. Even Ryan, who rarely spoke, ventured, "I want to learn. I don't want to be just a salesperson forever." Emily nodded again, and for the first time, Ryan felt someone saw him as more than a number on the sales sheet. Jennifer, however, remained rigid, her arms crossed. "I'm the sales manager," she said, her tone defiant as if trying to reclaim control. "My job is to make sure the team hits targets. I don't need lessons on purpose." The comment, laced with resistance, made Chloe and Ethan wince, but Emily didn't flinch. She looked at Jennifer, not with anger, but with a patience that was almost unnerving. "Jennifer," she said, "you're good at what you do. The numbers prove it. But leading isn't just about numbers. It's about people. and sometimes it's about admitting you might be wrong." Silence fell again, but this time it was different. Not accusatory, but reflective. Jennifer blinked, her face red, but she didn't retort. For the first time, she seemed at a loss for words. Emily stood, the sound of her worn white sneakers echoing in the silence. "I didn't come here to fire anyone," she said, looking each person in the eye. "I came to build a Sterling Motors that reflects who we are, not who we think we should look like. But that starts with you. With all of us." She paused, letting her words linger. "I want you to think about that until tomorrow, because from now on, this company will value respect, inclusion, and purpose, and I'll be here every day to make sure that happens." Emily grabbed her battered shoulder bag and walked toward the door, but before leaving, she turned. "And, Jennifer," she added, with a look that blended firmness and empathy, "you can be part of this, or not. The choice is yours." As the door closed behind her, the showroom seemed to hum with a new energy. Emily, with her unshakable dignity and ability to see beyond facades, had planted a seed. But the road ahead would be long, and everyone there knew the real test was yet to come. Emily Carter, a black woman in simple clothes, walked into Sterling Motors and was met with racism and disdain from Jennifer, Chloe, Ethan, and Ryan, who judged her for her skin and appearance. To everyone's shock, she revealed herself as the new owner of the dealership, turning the tables on the team's arrogance. In the meeting that followed, Emily confronted their prejudice with calm and dignity, asking the employees to share their motivations. While Ethan and Ryan began to open up, Jennifer remained resistant, challenging Emily's authority. Now, the stage is set for a confrontation that could define the future of Sterling Motors. Jennifer tapped her pen against the meeting table, the rhythmic sound cutting through the silence like a challenge. The room, with its white walls and wide windows, felt small under the growing tension. Emily, seated at the head of the table, kept her eyes on a notepad, but her posture, shoulders straight, hands calm, signaled she was in charge. Jennifer, however, wasn't ready to back down. "With all due respect," she said, her voice laced with barely veiled sarcasm, "do you really think you can just walk in here, with no experience in the business, and change everything? I've been running sales for 5 years. I know how things work." The comment was like a spark in a powder keg. Chloe, seated next to Jennifer, looked up, expecting a showdown. Ethan and Ryan, still rattled from the earlier meeting, stayed quiet, their eyes darting between the two women. Michael, the general manager, cleared his throat but didn't dare intervene. Emily, meanwhile, raised her gaze slowly, her dark eyes glinting with an intensity that made Jennifer hesitate for a moment. 5 years, Emily repeated, her voice so calm it seemed to disarm Jennifer's aggression. "That's impressive, Jennifer. Your sales are proof of your talent. But," she paused, tilting her head, "leading isn't just about hitting targets. It's about ensuring no one here is judged by the color of their skin or the clothes they wear before they even get a chance to speak." The remark cut through the air, bringing the racism Jennifer tried to ignore into sharp focus. Jennifer flushed, her lips tightening. "This has nothing to do with that," she stammered, gesturing vaguely at Emily. "It's about competence. This is a high-end business, and clients expect a certain profile." The word profile came out loaded, a euphemism everyone understood. Chloe nodded slightly but looked away when Emily's gaze met hers. Emily stood, the sound of her worn white sneakers echoing in the silent room. "Profile," she said, walking slowly to the window, where the morning light illuminated her deep, rich skin. "You mean clients wouldn't accept someone like me? A black woman in simple jeans, leading Sterling Motors?" She turned, facing Jennifer directly. "Or is it you who can't accept it?" The room fell silent. Jennifer opened her mouth, but no words came out. The arrogance that had propped her up seemed to crumble under the weight of Emily's gaze. "I didn't come here to be accepted by you," Emily continued, her voice gaining strength but never losing composure. "I came to build a company that respects everyone, and if you want to keep leading, you'll need to decide if you're with me or against me." Michael finally stepped in, his voice shaky. "Ms. Carter, Jennifer's just concerned about the transition. Right, Jennifer?" He looked at her, almost pleading, but Jennifer, her eyes flashing, stood up. "I don't need anyone speaking for me," she snapped. "If you want to change everything, Emily, you'll have to prove you can lead. It's not just about walking in and saying you're the owner." Emily smiled, a smile that blended confidence and challenge. "Prove it?" she asked, returning to the head of the table. "I've already started, and you'll see, Jennifer, that leading is about doing what's right even when it's hard. Now, sit down. We have work to do." The confrontation left the room charged with electricity. Jennifer reluctantly returned to her seat, but the glint in her eyes said the battle was far from over. Emily, with her unshakable composure, had asserted her authority, but the path to transforming Sterling Motors would be a war of wills, and everyone there knew the next move would be decisive. The Sterling Motors meeting room was bathed in the afternoon light streaming through the windows, illuminating the tense faces of the employees. Emily Carter, in her gray t-shirt and simple jeans, stood tall, a stark contrast to Jennifer's rigid formality, who shifted in her chair, her impeccable blazer no longer seeming like armor that could protect her. Chloe, Ethan, and Ryan watched in silence, still processing the earlier clash, while Michael, the general manager, scribbled nervously as if trying to anchor himself in paperwork. Emily placed her hands on the table, her dark eyes scanning each person in the room. "This company," she began, her voice firm but infused with an almost tangible conviction, "was built on sales, on numbers, on status. But starting today, we're going to build something different. We're going to build respect, inclusion, a Sterling Motors where no one is judged by the color of their skin, the clothes they wear, or the accent they have." She paused, letting her words echo, and their weight made Chloe lower her eyes in shame. Jennifer huffed, crossing her arms. "Respect is great, Emily, but this is a business. Clients want luxury, not sermons." Her tone was defiant but less certain than before, as if she felt the ground beneath her starting to give way. Emily didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, a smile that mixed patience and determination. "You're right, Jennifer. It is a business, and businesses that don't adapt die. Today's clients want more than expensive cars. They want companies that stand for something. And I'm going to make sure Sterling Motors stands for inclusion." She turned to the team, pointing to a whiteboard on the wall. "First step, we're going to change how we treat people. That starts with you." Emily picked up a marker and wrote a single word in large letters: respect. "From now on, every client who walks in, seductive. Emily Carter, a black woman. In simple clothes, walked into Sterling Motors and was met with racism and disdain from Jennifer, Chloe, Ethan, and Ryan, who judged her for her skin and appearance. To everyone's shock, she revealed herself as the new owner of the dealership, turning the tables on the team's arrogance. In the meeting that followed, Emily confronted their prejudice with calm and dignity, asking the employees to share their motivations. While Ethan and Ryan began to open up, Jennifer remained resistant, challenging Emily's authority, culminating in a clash that set the stage for the company's transformation. Now, Emily is starting to implement her vision of an inclusive culture, but the resistance from some employees promises challenges. Jennifer tapped her pen against the meeting table, the rhythmic sound slicing through the silence like a challenge. The room, with its white walls and wide windows, felt small under the mounting tension. Emily, seated at the head of the table, kept her eyes fixed on a notepad, but her posture, shoulders straight, hands calm, signaled she was in charge. Jennifer, however, wasn't ready to yield. "With all due respect," she said, her voice dripping with thinly veiled sarcasm, "do you really think you can just walk in here, with no experience in the business, and change everything? I've been running sales for 5 years. I know how things work." The comment was like a spark in a powder keg. Chloe, seated next to Jennifer, looked up, expecting a showdown. Ethan and Ryan, still shaken from the previous meeting, stayed quiet, their eyes flickering between the two women. Michael, the general manager, cleared his throat but didn't dare intervene. Emily, meanwhile, raised her gaze slowly, her dark eyes gleaming with an intensity that made Jennifer falter for a moment. 5 years, Emily repeated, her voice so calm it seemed to disarm Jennifer's aggression. "That's impressive, Jennifer. Your sales are proof of your talent. But," she paused, tilting her head, "leading isn't just about hitting targets. It's about ensuring no one here is judged by the color of their skin or the clothes they wear before they even get a chance to speak." The remark cut through the air, laying bare the racism Jennifer tried to sidestep. Jennifer flushed, her lips tightening. "This has nothing to do with that," she stammered, gesturing vaguely at Emily. "It's about competence. This is a high-end business, and clients expect a certain profile." The word profile came out heavy, a euphemism everyone understood. Chloe nodded slightly but looked away when Emily's gaze met hers. Emily stood, the sound of her worn white sneakers echoing in the silent room. "Profile," she said, walking slowly to the window, where the morning light illuminated her deep, rich skin. "You mean clients wouldn't accept someone like me? A black woman in simple jeans, leading Sterling Motors?" She turned, facing Jennifer directly. "Or is it you who can't accept it?" The room fell silent. Jennifer opened her mouth, but no words came out. The arrogance that had propped her up seemed to crumble under the weight of Emily's gaze. "I didn't come here to be accepted by you," Emily continued, her voice gaining strength but never losing composure. "I came to build a company that respects everyone, and if you want to keep leading, you'll need to decide if you're with me or against me." Michael finally stepped in, his voice shaky. "Miss Carter, Jennifer's just concerned about the transition. Right, Jennifer?" He looked at her, almost pleading. But Jennifer, her eyes flashing, stood up. "I don't need anyone speaking for me," she snapped. "If you want to change everything, Emily, you'll have to prove you can lead. It's not just about walking in and saying you're the owner." Emily smiled, a smile that blended confidence and challenge. "Prove it," she asked, returning to the head of the table. "I've already started, and you'll see, Jennifer, that leading is about doing what's right, even when it's hard. Now sit down. We have work to do." The confrontation left, the room charged with electricity. Jennifer, reluctantly, returned to her seat, but the glint in her eyes said the battle was far from over. Emily, with her unshakable composure, had asserted her authority, but the path to transforming Sterling Motors would be a war of wills, and everyone there knew the next move would be decisive. The Sterling Motors meeting room seemed to pulse with raw energy, as if the white walls were holding back a storm about to erupt. Emily Carter, in her gray t-shirt and simple jeans, stood before the whiteboard, where the word "respect" still glowed in large letters. Jennifer, Chloe, Ethan, and Ryan sat around the table, each carrying the weight of what had been said and what hadn't. Michael, the general manager, fidgeted nervously with the papers in front of him, but his eyes didn't dare meet Emily's. The meeting, meant to outline the dealership's new direction, had become something far greater. A reckoning. Emily took a deep breath, her dark eyes fixed on the employees. "Yesterday, I asked you to think about who you are and what you want for this company," she said, her voice firm but with a softness that invited reflection. "But before we talk about the future, we need to talk about the past, about what happened when I first walked in here." She paused, letting the silence settle heavily. "I want to hear from you. I want to know what you thought when you saw me. A black woman in simple clothes, and why you thought I didn't belong here." The air grew thick. Jennifer crossed her arms, her face red, but she didn't speak. Chloe, usually quick with sarcastic remarks, bit her lip, her eyes glued to the table. Ethan and Ryan exchanged uneasy glances as if hoping the other would take the lead. Michael tried to intervene. "Miss Carter, maybe we can focus on the new policies." But Emily raised her hand, silencing him with a calm, unquestionable gesture. "No, Michael," Emily said. "This is the new policy, facing what's wrong. So, who's going first?" Her gaze swept across the table and the silence stretched, each second amplifying the guilt hanging in the room. Ethan was the first to break. He rubbed his hands together, his voice shaky. I judged you, Emily. When I saw you, I thought you were just a lost customer. Not because of what you were wearing, but, well, because of your color." He swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. "My daughter's mixed race, you know, and I know how it feels when people look at her the wrong way. But I did the same to you. I'm sorry." The admission came out heavy, and Ethan lowered his head, as if the weight of the truth was crushing him. Emily nodded, not with judgment but with a firmness that demanded more. "Thank you, Ethan. That's honesty. Anyone else?" Chloe hesitated, her hands fidgeting with a ring. I laughed at you," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought you didn't belong here. It was wrong, and I feel awful about it." Tears welled in her eyes, and she wiped them quickly, embarrassed. Ryan, next to her, cleared his throat. "I didn't say anything, but I thought the same. I won't lie. I'm sorry, Emily." The confessions, though hesitant, were like cracks in a dam, releasing a stream of vulnerability. But Jennifer remained silent, her lips tight, her eyes flashing with resistance. Emily turned to her. "Jennifer, you're the leader of this team. What do you have to say?" Jennifer lifted her chin, her tone defensive. "I did my job. I protected Sterling Motors' standard. I'm not going to apologize for that." The room grew tense, Jennifer's words a clear challenge. Emily took a step forward, the sound of her worn white sneakers echoing. "Protecting the standard isn't judging someone by their skin or their clothes," she said, her voice now sharp. "It's creating a place where everyone feels welcome. You failed at that, Jennifer. And if you don't change, there's no place for you here." The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer blinked, her face pale as Chloe, Ethan, and Ryan stared at her, shocked. Emily returned to the whiteboard and wrote another word next to respect. Change. "This is our commitment now," she said, looking at everyone. "It starts with the truth, and it continues with actions. We're going to build a Sterling Motors that's an example, not a shame." The meeting ended, but the energy in the room remained electric. The confessions from Ethan, Chloe, and Ryan were a first step, but Jennifer's resistance promised more conflict. Emily, with her quiet strength, had opened a wound, and now it was up to the team to decide if they would heal it together. The Sterling Motors meeting room was charged with a silence that felt alive, as if every held breath was an unspoken confession. Emily Carter, in her gray t-shirt and simple jeans, stood by the whiteboard where the words respect and change stood as a reminder of the transformation she demanded. After the collective confrontation, where Ethan, Chloe, and Ryan admitted their prejudices, Jennifer's refusal to apologize had left an open wound. Now, Emily watched the team with dark eyes that seemed to see beyond their words, using silence as a lens to reveal what each was hiding. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her worn, white sneakers were planted firmly on the floor, and her posture, shoulders straight, hands relaxed, radiated an authority that didn't rely on shouting or orders. The silence stretched, heavy, forcing the employees to confront their own thoughts. Jennifer, seated with her arms crossed, shifted restlessly, the sound of her blazer brushing against the chair echoing like a shout in the quiet. Chloe, usually so talkative, kept her eyes glued to the table, her fingers bending a paperclip until it warped. Ethan and Ryan, still shaken by their confessions, avoided Emily's gaze, as if afraid she could read their souls. Michael, the general manager, tried to fill the void. "Ms. Carter, maybe we can discuss the next steps for training," he suggested, his voice hesitant. But Emily raised a finger, a gesture so subtle it barely moved, and Michael fell silent, his face flushing. The silence returned, denser, more demanding. It was as if Emily was giving space for the truth to emerge, for the employees' intentions to reveal themselves without the shield of rehearsed words. Jennifer finally broke. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice sharp but trembling, slightly. "We've already said what we think. What more do you want?" Her tone was defiant, but her eyes betrayed an insecurity that Emily's silence amplified. Emily didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked slowly to the window, the afternoon light illuminating her deep, rich skin. The sound of her sneakers echoed, each step a reminder of her unshakable presence. "I want commitment," Emily said at last, turning to face Jennifer. The pause before her response made her words feel heavier, as if forged in that silence. "I want to know if you're willing to change, not just talk about change, because words are easy, actions are hard." She looked at each of them, the silence wrapping the room again, forcing them to absorb the weight of her words. Chloe was the first to yield to the silence. "I want to change," she said, her voice low, almost choked. "I want to be better. I don't want anyone to feel what you felt when you walked in here." Her confession, drawn out by the pressure of the silence, was raw, vulnerable. Ethan nodded, his eyes glistening. "Me too. For my daughter's sake, and because—" "You're right, Emily." Ryan hesitantly murmured, "I'll try. I don't know how, but I'll try." Jennifer, however, remained rigid, her lips tight. The silence exposed her, highlighting her resistance like a stain on a mirror. Emily stepped closer to her, stopping just a few feet away. "Jennifer," she said, her voice calm but firm as granite. "The silence says more than your words, and it's telling me you're not ready yet." She paused, letting the weight of her words linger. "But you'll have time. Not much, but you'll have it." Emily returned to the whiteboard and wrote a third word: commitment. "This is the next step," she said, looking at everyone. "And it starts now. You decide if you're in or out." She turned, grabbed her battered shoulder bag, and left. The room, the sound of the door closing echoing like a period at the end of a sentence. The silence that remained was no longer just a tool. It was a challenge, an invitation for each person to confront their own flaws. The twilight painted the sky orange as Emily Carter stepped out of Sterling Motors, the weight of the day still, pulsing in her chest. She walked through the parking lot, her worn white sneakers kicking loose pebbles, her battered bag swinging on her shoulder. Her deep, rich skin glowed under the golden light, and her curly hair, now loose from its bun, danced in the breeze. After days of confrontations, the cruel racism from Jennifer, the hesitant confessions from Chloe, Ethan, and Ryan, and the silence that had revealed so much, Emily needed a moment to breathe. But fate had other plans. At the corner of the parking lot, a black teenage girl, maybe 16, hesitated by a used car, her eyes downcast, her nervous hands twisting the strap of a backpack. Nearby, a white man in an expensive suit was talking loudly on his phone, ignoring her. Emily recognized the pattern. He was a client, and the girl, likely someone's companion, was being rendered invisible. The scene cut like a knife. Emily had once been that girl, ignored, judged for her skin, her simple clothes, for the space she dared to occupy. She approached, her voice soft but firm. "Hey, you okay?" The girl, startled, looked up, hesitant. I just came with my dad. He's talking to a salesperson." The man on the phone shot an impatient glance as if Emily and the girl were an interruption. "No need to bother," he said, his tone sharp before returning to his call. Emily felt her blood boil, but she kept her composure, a contained fire glinting in her eyes. "It's not a bother," she replied, looking straight at the man. "It's respect. Everyone deserves to be seen." The girl blinked, surprised, and a faint smile crept onto her face, as if someone had noticed her for the first time. The man huffed but pocketed his phone, clearly uncomfortable under Emily's gaze. "What's your name?" Emily asked, turning back to the girl. "Layla," she replied, her voice shy but gaining strength. "Layla, have you ever thought about what you want to be?" Emily asked, crouching to meet her eyes. Layla hesitated, then said, "I want to be an engineer, but sometimes I think I can't do it." The weight of doubt in her voice was familiar. Emily had carried that same fear. "Layla," Emily said, her voice trembling with emotion, "you can be anything. Don't let anyone, not anyone, tell you that you don't belong. Not your skin, not your clothes, nothing." She gestured to herself, her simple jeans, her gray t-shirt. "I'm the owner of this dealership, and if I got here, you can get wherever you want." Layla's eyes widened, brimming with tears and hope. The man, now silent, seemed to shrink. Across the parking lot, Ethan and Chloe, leaving the dealership, stopped, watching the scene. Chloe covered her mouth, her eyes welling up, while Ethan nodded, as if grasping something new. Jennifer, farther back, watched with her arms crossed, her face a mask of conflict. Emily handed Layla a Sterling Motors business card. "Come visit me anytime. Let's talk about engineering." Layla clutched the card like a treasure, her smile lighting up her face. As Emily walked away, the breeze carried the echo of her words, a promise of inclusion that reached beyond the parking lot. Sterling Motors was changing, not just inside but in the world around it. Emily knew every gesture, every word was a seed, and as the sun set, she felt her heart beat stronger, knowing the fight for respect was just beginning. The Sterling Motors showroom was quiet that morning, but it wasn't the awkward silence of days past. It was a reflective silence, as if the dealership, with its gleaming cars and crystal chandeliers, was holding its breath, waiting for the next chapter. A week had passed since the confrontation in the meeting room, where Emily Carter, the new owner, had exposed the team's prejudice with a calm that was both disarming and overwhelming. The words respect, change, and commitment, written by her on the whiteboard, still stood there, a constant reminder of the transformation she demanded. Emily, in her gray t-shirt, simple jeans, and worn white sneakers, walked through the showroom, her battered bag swinging on her shoulder. Her curly hair, now loose, danced with her movements, and her dark eyes carried a determination no one dared underestimate anymore. The revelation of her identity as the owner of Sterling Motors had shaken the team's foundations, but it was what came next, the slow and painful process of change that would define the future. Jennifer, the sales manager, stood behind the counter, organizing papers with a rigidity that betrayed her unease. Her impeccable blazer, once a shield of arrogance, seemed uncomfortable, as if it no longer fit who she was becoming. Chloe, the receptionist, was on the phone with a client, but her voice, usually sarcastic, now sounded softer, almost hesitant. Ethan and Ryan, the junior salespeople, were talking near a silver sedan, but their eyes flicked to Emily every few seconds as if seeking approval. The tension in the air was palpable, but there was something new, a seed of change. After the meeting where Ethan, Chloe, and Ryan admitted their prejudices, the weight of guilt had forced them to look inward. But Jennifer, with her stubborn resistance, remained a fortress, reluctant to yield. Emily knew the team's arc of redemption depended on everyone, but Jennifer would be the greatest challenge. Emily stopped in the center of the showroom, taking a deep breath before addressing the team. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice firm yet with a warmth that invited connection. "Today, we're going to talk about what it means to be part of the new Sterling Motors. Not as employees, but as people. She pointed to the whiteboard where the word commitment glowed in large letters. I want to hear how you're processing what happened, how you're committing to change. Silence returned, but this time it was different. Not confrontational, but introspective. Ethan spoke first, rubbing the back of his neck, his eyes downcast. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, Emily, about my daughter, about how I don't want her to grow up in a world where people judge her the way I judged you. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. I started that diversity training you recommended, and I talked to my wife about how I can be better. It's not easy, but I want to get this right. Emily nodded, a faint smile crossing her lips. That's a start, Ethan, and it's a strong start. Her eyes turned to Chloe, who was nervously fidgeting with a paperclip. And you, Chloe? Chloe hesitated, her face flushing. I felt awful after that meeting, she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. I always thought I was good with people, but I realized I was only good with people I thought mattered. That was wrong. She lifted her eyes, meeting Emily's. I started changing how I talked to clients. Yesterday, I helped a woman who seemed out of place by Sterling Motors' old standards. I treated her like I would anyone else, and you know what? She bought a car, and she thanked me. A shy smile crossed her face, and for the first time, Chloe seemed proud, not of herself, but of something bigger. Ryan, usually quiet, cleared his throat. I'm not much for talking, Emily, but I started reading about implicit bias. It's hard to admit, but I had it. Maybe I still do. But I'm trying to change. I want to be someone my little sister can respect. He looked at the floor, but his voice carried a raw sincerity that made Ethan nod in support. The showroom seemed to pulse with a new energy, as if the hesitant confessions were building bridges where walls once stood. But all eyes turned to Jennifer, who remained silent, arms crossed, her face a mask of resistance. Emily approached her, the sound of her sneakers echoing on the polished floor. Jennifer, she said, her voice calm but with an intensity that demanded attention. You've heard your colleagues. They're trying. They're committing. What about you? Jennifer lifted her chin, her eyes flashing, but there was something different in them. A crack in the armor. You want me to apologize again? She shot back, her voice sharp but less certain. I already said I did my job. I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not. Emily didn't flinch. She sat in the chair next to Jennifer, an unexpected move that made the manager blink in surprise. No one's asking you to pretend, Jennifer, Emily said, her voice now softer, almost like a conversation between friends. I'm asking you to be honest, with yourself, with what you felt when you first saw me walk in here, with what you still feel. The silence that followed was heavy, as if the air had turned solid. Jennifer opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her eyes, usually so hard, began to glisten with tears she fought to hold back. I'm not like that, she said finally, her voice breaking. I'm not a bad person, but when you walked in, I thought you didn't belong here, and it wasn't just the clothes. It was because she stopped, swallowing hard, unable to say the word. Because of my skin, Emily finished, without accusation but with a firmness that left no room for evasion. Jennifer lowered her eyes, her hands gripping her blazer. Yes, she whispered, the word almost inaudible. And I was wrong. I know I was wrong. But admitting it, it's hard. I built my career being strong, being the best. And now I feel like I'm losing everything. Emily leaned forward, her eyes locked on Jennifer's. You're not losing anything, Jennifer. You're gaining a chance to be better, to truly lead. Not with numbers, but with courage, with respect. She paused, letting her words sink in. You're good at what you do, but you can be more than good. You can be inspiring. Jennifer blinked, tears finally escaping, tracing lines down her made-up face. She wiped them quickly as if embarrassed by the vulnerability. "I don't know where to start," she admitted, her voice hoarse. "But I want to try. Not for you, Emily, for me, because I don't want to be the person who judges others like that." The showroom seemed to vibrate with the weight of that moment. Chloe, Ethan, and Ryan, watching in silence, exchanged glances as if feeling the impact of Jennifer's transformation. Michael, who had stayed quiet, nodded, a faint smile appearing on his face. Emily stood, the sound of her sneakers echoing as a reminder of her unshakable presence. "That's all I'm asking, Jennifer," she said. "A start, a commitment. And now, all of you have a chance to do this together." She turned to the whiteboard, picked up the marker, and wrote a new word: redemption. "This is what we're building," she said, looking at the team. "It's not easy, it's not quick, but it's possible, and it starts with each of you, every day, choosing to be better." As Emily left the showroom, the morning light illuminating her curly hair, the team remained silent, but now it was a silence of hope. Jennifer, still wiping her face, looked at the whiteboard, at the word redemption, and for the first time felt something new: the possibility of change. Sterling Motors was no longer just a luxury car dealership. It was a place where flawed, human people could find a new path. The afternoon light streamed through the wide windows of Sterling Motors, bathing the showroom in golden hues that seemed to soften its edges. The gleaming cars, once symbols of status and exclusivity, now shared space with something new, a transformative energy pulsing in the air. 2 weeks had passed since the meeting that shook the team, where Ethan, Chloe, Ryan, and even Jennifer, the resistant sales manager, began confronting their prejudices. The word redemption, written by Emily Carter on the whiteboard, still stood alongside respect, change, and commitment, like a roadmap for the dealership's future. Below is the translation of the provided text into American English, preserving the tone, style, and nuances of the original. Emily, in her gray t-shirt, simple jeans, and worn white sneakers, stood in the center of the showroom, not as an imposing figure but as a quiet force. Her battered shoulder bag rested on the reception counter, and her loose curly hair caught the light as she chatted with a client, an elderly woman in a floral dress laughing at something Emily said. The scene was ordinary, but for those who knew the old Sterling Motors, it was revolutionary. The Emily who had been met with disdain and racism now led with a natural ease that defied the place's old rules. The team watched, each in their own way. Chloe, behind the counter, assisted a client with a genuine attentiveness that hadn't existed weeks ago. Ethan and Ryan, organizing brochures near a black SUV, exchanged comments about the new customer service protocol Emily had implemented. Jennifer, however, stood farther back near the office door, her arms crossed, her impeccable blazer contrasting with the conflict in her eyes. Her admission of guilt in the last meeting had been a milestone, but the transition from arrogance to humility was a steep path, and she was still stumbling. Emily finished her conversation with the client, who left with a smile and a warm handshake. Then she turned to the team, clapping her hands to get their attention. "Everyone, quick meeting," she said, her voice clear but without the authoritarian tone Jennifer used to command. It was an invitation, not an order, and that made all the difference. The team gathered around her, even Jennifer, reluctantly, stepping closer but staying on the edge of the circle. "I want to talk about leadership," Emily began, her dark eyes scanning each face. "Not the kind of leadership that's imposed with shouting or impossible targets. The kind that comes from listening, understanding, and building something together." She paused, pointing to the whiteboard. "You've seen the words there. Respect, change, commitment, redemption. They're not just ideas. They're what make us better. And today, I want each of you to lead a piece of that." The team exchanged confused glances. Ethan spoke first, rubbing the back of his neck. "Lead? Emily, I'm just a salesperson. I don't know how to do that. Chloe nodded hesitantly. Yeah, I'm not a manager either. How do we lead anything? Even Ryan, usually quiet, mumbled, We're barely getting used to the changes. Emily smiled, a smile that blended empathy and challenge. Leadership isn't a title. It's a choice. It's deciding to do what's right, even when it's hard. It's listening to a client no one else wants to hear. It's helping a struggling colleague. It's admitting when you're wrong and trying again. She looked directly at Jennifer, who averted her gaze, her face flushing. All of you can lead, and I'm going to show you how. She picked up a marker and wrote on the whiteboard. Leadership. First step, accountability, she said, turning to the team. Today, each of you will take on a task to transform this place. Chloe, you'll lead a training session on inclusive customer service. Ethan, you'll create a program for clients who've never felt welcome here, like low-income families or people who don't look wealthy. Ryan, you'll work with me on the new marketing campaign, one that shows who we are now, a company for everyone. The three nodded, their eyes shining with a mix of nerves and excitement. Chloe jotted something on her phone, already brainstorming ideas. Ethan smiled, picturing his daughter proud of him. Ryan, though hesitant, seemed intrigued by the chance to create something new. But Jennifer remained silent, her arms still crossed, her face a mask of doubt. Emily approached her, her voice low but firm. Jennifer, you're the sales manager. Your leadership is crucial. I want you to lead the creation of a code of conduct for the team, one that ensures no one, client or employee, is judged by their appearance or skin color. The request was a direct challenge, but also an opportunity. Jennifer blinked, surprised, as if she hadn't expected to be included. Me? Jennifer asked, her tone defensive but tinged with curiosity. Why me? You know, I was the worst to you. The admission came out almost as a whisper, and the showroom fell silent, all eyes on the two women. Emily tilted her head, her curly hair catching the light. Because I believe in you, Jennifer. Because I know you can be more than the person who judged me. You're smart, determined, and passionate about this place. Now use that to build something better. She paused, her eyes locked on Jennifer's. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to start. The silence that followed was different, not heavy, but full of possibility. Jennifer swallowed hard, her eyes glistening with tears she fought to hold back. For the first time, she didn't push back. Instead, she nodded slowly, as if accepting the weight and the honor of what Emily was asking. I'll try, she said, her voice hoarse. I can't promise it'll be perfect, but I'll try. Emily nodded, a glint of pride in her eyes. That's all I ask, Jennifer. And when you're ready, I want you to tell me how I can support you. The gesture, so simple and genuine, made Chloe cover her mouth, moved while Ethan and Ryan exchanged looks of admiration. Even Michael, watching in silence, seemed touched by Emily's quiet strength. She turned to the team, pointing to the whiteboard. Leadership is this: taking the first step, even when you're scared. It's believing we can be better together. And I believe in every one of you. She grabbed her battered bag and walked toward the showroom door. But before leaving, she turned back. I want to see those ideas tomorrow. Show me, and yourselves, what you're capable of. As Emily walked out, the afternoon light illuminating her silhouette, the showroom seemed to hum with a new energy. Chloe, Ethan, and Ryan began talking animatedly, exchanging ideas for their tasks. Jennifer, still standing, looked at the whiteboard, at the word leadership, and for the first time felt something beyond resistance. Inspiration. Emily wasn't just the owner of Sterling Motors. She was a leader who saw potential where others saw flaws, who turned prejudice into purpose, who challenged everyone to be better. In the parking lot, Emily paused for a moment, gazing at the orange twilight sky. She knew the journey was just beginning, but every step, every conversation, every confrontation, Every seed planted was building something greater. Sterling Motors would no longer be just a dealership. It would be an example of how leadership, rooted in empathy and resolve, could change the world, one person at a time. The morning at Sterling Motors was vibrant, with the showroom bustling, with clients and the hum of conversations filling the air. The crystal chandeliers gleamed, reflecting the sunlight streaming through the windows, but the true glow came from the change Emily Carter had begun to build. 3 weeks after her arrival, the dealership was unrecognizable. Chloe now greeted every client with a genuine smile, no longer judging their clothes or backgrounds. Ethan led a program for low-income clients with a passion that surprised even himself. Ryan, once shy, was working on a marketing campaign celebrating diversity, his ideas coming to life on billboards across the city. Even Jennifer, the once arrogant sales manager, was starting to change, revising the code of conduct with a hesitant but growing dedication. Emily, in her gray t-shirt, simple jeans, and worn white sneakers, moved through the showroom with the calm of someone who knows the work is just beginning. Her loose, curly hair swayed with her steps, and her battered bag rested on the counter, a symbol of her authenticity. The words on the whiteboard, respect, change, commitment, redemption, leadership, were now more than words. They were the soul of the new Sterling Motors. But that day, a gust from the past blew through the glass door, bringing a challenge no one expected. The door opened with a creak, and a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, with a rigid posture, stepped into the showroom. His face was familiar to Michael, the general manager, who paled upon recognizing him. It was Robert Sterling, the former owner of the dealership, who had sold the business months ago to retire. Rumors said he regretted the sale, and his presence, with his chin raised and eyes narrowed, suggested he hadn't come for a friendly visit. "Michael," Robert said, his voice sharp, ignoring the curious glances from Chloe, Ethan, and Ryan. "Where's the new owner? I want to meet her." His tone carried a mix of curiosity and disdain, as if he doubted the capability of whoever was leading his Sterling Motors. Jennifer, organizing papers at the counter, froze, her eyes flickering, between Robert and Emily, who approached slowly. "I'm Emily Carter," she said, stopping a few steps from Robert. Her voice was firm but not hostile, and her dark eyes met his with a calm that disarmed. "Welcome back to Sterling Motors." The showroom fell silent, clients sensing the tension and instinctively stepping back. Robert sized her up, his gaze lingering on her simple jeans and worn sneakers, an echo of the prejudice Emily had faced weeks earlier. "So it's you," Robert said, his voice thick with skepticism. "I heard a woman was changing everything around here, but frankly, I didn't expect this." The word "this" was a veiled jab, and the implicit racism cut through the air, like a knife. Chloe gasped. Ethan clenched his fists, and Ryan took a step forward as if ready to intervene. Jennifer, however, stayed still, her face a mask of conflict, as if Robert's return reignited her old loyalty. Emily didn't back down. Instead, she stepped forward, the sound of her sneakers echoing on the polished floor. "What were you expecting, Mr. Sterling?" she asked, her voice calm but with a strength that seemed to draw the air from the room. "Someone in an expensive suit? Someone who fits the old profile of this company? Because if that's it, you're going to be surprised by what Sterling Motors is becoming." Robert laughed, a dry, condescending sound. "I built this place on standards, young lady. High-end clients don't want sermons about inclusion. They want luxury, exclusivity. You think you can lead a company like this with no experience? Just idealism?" He gestured, pointing to the showroom as if it were his lost kingdom. The silence that followed was electric, charged with anticipation. All eyes were on Emily, waiting for her response. But she didn't speak immediately. Instead, she walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and wrote a new word in large letters. "Purpose." "This," she said, turning to Robert, is what's guiding Sterling Motors now. It's not just about selling cars. It's about building a place where everyone feels welcome. Clients, employees, you. Robert blinked, thrown off by Emily's composure. Before he could retort, Jennifer, who had remained silent, stepped forward, her voice shaky but resolute. "She's right, Mr. Sterling." The showroom held its breath. Jennifer, who weeks ago had challenged Emily with arrogance, was now defending her. "I used to think standards were everything too, but I was wrong. Emily showed us that leading is more than numbers. It's about doing what's right." Chloe, inspired, chimed in. "I helped a client yesterday who never would have walked in here before. She said she felt seen for the first time. That's because of Emily." Ethan nodded, his voice steady. "And I created a program for families like mine. People who thought places like this weren't for them. That's the new Sterling Motors." Ryan, usually reserved, pointed to the whiteboard. "The campaign we're working on, it's about showing this company is for everyone. And it's working. Sales are up 15% this month." The comment caught Robert off guard, and he looked at Michael, who nodded nervously in confirmation. "It's true, Mr. Sterling. Ms. Carter's vision is getting results." Robert opened his mouth, but no words came out. The weight of the united team defending Emily was something he hadn't expected. She seized the moment, stepping forward, her eyes shining with contained emotion. "Mr. Sterling, when I bought this dealership, I knew what was at stake. I didn't come to erase what you built. I came to make it bigger, to show that luxury and inclusion can go hand in hand, that a black woman in simple jeans can lead just as well as, or better than, anyone." The showroom erupted in spontaneous applause, not just from the team but from clients who had stopped to listen. Chloe wiped away tears, Ethan smiled with pride, and Ryan clapped with enthusiasm. Even Jennifer, her eyes glistening, joined the applause, a gesture that sealed her transformation. Michael, relieved, smiled, while Robert, for the first time, seemed small, his air of superiority crumbling. Emily raised her hand, silencing the crowd with a simple gesture. "This is the climax of our story," she said, her voice vibrating with emotion. "It's not about me. It's about us. About what we can build when we choose respect, inclusion, and purpose. Sterling Motors isn't just a dealership anymore. It's a movement." She looked at Robert, then at the team, and finally at the clients who gazed at her with admiration. "And I invite all of you to be part of it." Robert, defeated by the weight of the truth, nodded slowly. "Maybe I underestimated you, Ms. Carter," he said, his voice low. "I want to see where this goes." He turned and left, the glass, daughter, closing behind him with a sound that seemed to end an era. As the showroom came back to life, Emily stood still, her heart pounding. The revelation of her leadership, affirmed not just by her position but by the transformation she had inspired, was the high point of her journey. Sterling Motors was being reborn, and the impact of that moment would echo far beyond its doors. The Sterling Motors showroom had never felt so alive. The evening light streamed through the wide windows, painting the polished floor in orange hues that danced across the gleaming cars. The echo of the confrontation with Robert Sterling, the former owner, still lingered, but now there was a new energy in the air, a blend of hope, pride, and possibility. Emily Carter, in her gray t-shirt, simple jeans, and worn white sneakers, stood at the center of the showroom, not as an imposing figure but as a beacon, illuminating the path the team, the clients, and even she herself were walking. Her battered bag rested on the counter, and her loose curly hair caught the light, as if reflecting the glow of the transformation she had sparked. Weeks after her arrival, Sterling Motors was unrecognizable. The whiteboard, now almost an icon, displayed the words guiding the new era: respect, change, commitment, redemption, leadership, purpose. Each word told a story of prejudice confronted, mistakes confessed, courage discovered. Chloe, once sarcastic, now led inclusive customer service training, her voice filled with a passion that surprised even herself. Ethan, inspired by his daughter, had turned the program for low-income clients into a success, with families entering the showroom without fear of judgment. Ryan, once quiet, shone in creating campaigns celebrating diversity, his billboards spreading the new Sterling Motors message across the city. And Jennifer, the manager who had resisted so fiercely, worked on the code of conduct with a dedication that blended shame for the past and hope for the future. That afternoon, Emily gathered the team for one final meeting before the month's end, a moment to reflect and plan what came next. The showroom was quiet, except for the soft murmur of clients in the background, now greeted with genuine smiles and true attention. The team, Chloe, Ethan, Ryan, Jennifer, and Michael, the general manager, sat around the meeting table, the white walls reflecting the golden twilight. Emily, standing, held no papers or markers. Her presence alone, with her worn sneakers and steady posture, was enough to command the room. "I want to start by thanking you," Emily said, her voice calm but vibrating with an emotion that made everyone lean forward. "When I walked in here, I was met with looks of disdain, with words that hurt, with the certainty that I didn't belong." She paused, her dark eyes scanning each face, not with accusation, but with gratitude. "But you chose to change. You chose to look at yourselves, admit mistakes, and build something new. That's more than courage. That's purpose." Chloe wiped away a tear, trying to mask it with a smile. Ethan nodded, his eyes shining with pride. Ryan, more confident now, smiled openly, while Michael, who had always stayed neutral, seemed genuinely moved for the first time. Jennifer, her blazer less rigid, her shoulders more relaxed, looked at Emily with something akin to admiration. "You've transformed this place," Emily continued, gesturing toward the showroom. "But Sterling Motors isn't just ours. It belongs to everyone who walks through that door, everyone who's ever felt invisible, everyone who deserves to be seen." She walked to the window, the evening light illuminating her deep, rich skin. "When I was a child, I grew up hearing that certain places weren't for me, that I had to fit in, change who I was, to be accepted. But here," she turned, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, "we're showing that no one has to change, to belong. That respect and inclusion aren't just nice ideas, but actions, and you're making that happen." The silence in the room was profound, not tense but connective. Emily returned to the table, pulling a small notebook from her battered bag. "I want to share something with you," she said, opening the notebook to a page filled with notes. "These are stories from clients who've come to me in recent days. A mother who said, for the first time, she felt she could buy a car without being judged. A young man who walked in afraid of being ignored but left with a contract and a smile. An elderly woman who hugged me because Chloe treated her like family." She looked at Chloe, who was now openly crying, and smiled. "This is what you're building, and it's bigger than any car we sell." Emily closed the notebook, her voice gaining strength. "But our work doesn't end here. Sterling Motors is just the beginning. Each of you has the power to take this change beyond these doors, to your homes, your communities, your lives. And I want you to do that." She pointed to the whiteboard, to the word purpose. "This is our calling, not just to sell cars, but to change the world, one person at a time." The team applauded, a spontaneous sound that echoed through the showroom, drawing looks from clients. Jennifer, who weeks ago had resisted Emily's every word, was the first to stand, clapping with an intensity that surprised everyone. "You're right, Emily," she said, her voice hoarse but firm. "I almost gave up on myself, but you made me believe I can be better, and I want that to continue." The gesture, coming from Jennifer, was like a final seal on her redemption, and the room erupted in even louder applause. Emily raised her hand, silencing the team with a smile. "I have one last thing to ask of you," she said, her eyes shining with a mix of hope and determination. If this story, our story, has touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Talk about what we're doing here, about what it means to build a place where everyone belongs. Because if we can change a dealership, we can change a city, a country, a world. She stepped forward, her voice now a vibrant invitation. If you found Emily's story inspiring, like, share, and subscribe for more uplifting stories every week. Together, we can make respect and inclusion more than words. They can be our reality. As the team applauded again, Emily left the meeting room, her white sneakers echoing on the polished floor. In the parking lot, she paused, gazing at the orange twilight sky. The breeze caressed her curly hair, and she felt the weight and the beauty of what she had built. Sterling Motors was no longer just a luxury car dealership. It was a beacon of change, a testament to what happens when a black woman in simple jeans with a heart full of purpose decides to lead. And as the sun set, Emily knew this story, her story, their story, was only just beginning.